Hello and welcome to our Strasz Assessment Systems podcast, Beyond This Test, Strasz Talks. As always, I am your host, Roy McCorkle, the VP of Business Development at Strasz, and I'm really excited for today's conversation. It is probably the topic that we've covered in our podcast that I'm least qualified to speak to. And for that, I am very, very excited to have EB from the CFP board join us as my guest for this week. EB, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Rory. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, EB, today we're going to be talking about, as I said, a subject that I'm ill-equipped to talk about, which is women in leadership, particularly in our industry. And so I'm excited to get down to just some of the work that you've done in this area, some of the various efforts that you've put forth to support your fellow professionals in this area. But before we get there, if you could introduce yourself to those who may not know you on the podcast.
Yes, thank you so much. So my name is Ibi Lai Ojo. I'm the Director of Examinations at CFP Board, and I'm more than delighted to be here with you, my friend.
And I'm very glad to have you here too. So Ibi, tell me a little bit more about your career journey in testing and what brought you to this wild, wonderful world of assessment, as I'm so fond of saying.
I love it when I hear that, the wild, wonderful world of assessments. So my educational background is in industrial and organizational psychology. So after completing my master's degree, I started working in training and development. But I loved the assessment bit of it. So we'll develop training, and then at the end, we'll develop assessments. And I loved that piece so much. And I had a colleague leave the State Department where I was working and got a job at an assessment firm. And what is that? Some people do that for a living. Sign me on. So that was my taste into assessment in 2010 officially. And it's been a love relationship ever since.
Well, I love to hear that. And I think you are, one of the increasing minority, but increasing number of people that really have made assessment part of your journey throughout your career, which, I think is exciting as we have people more frequently really choosing this as a profession in some way, shape, or form. So, I follow you on LinkedIn, and one of the things that I'm always fascinated to see, in addition to sharing information about your fantastic employer, the CFP board, you often post information about leadership, and in particular, a focus on women in leadership. And I have to say, from the time I've started in this industry over 20 years ago, I've identified that for some time, it's, our fellow professionals are majority female. But it's only been the last several years that we've begun to see better balance in the leadership levels in our industry. And would love for you to share, what drives your passion in this area? Other than the obvious, I suppose. And how do you see this conversation as being so critical in our profession?
Right. I heard a quote by John Maxwell. I'm big on quotes. I share quotes that really mean a lot to me on LinkedIn.
I do.
I love the quotes because they resonate on so many levels. I heard the quote, everything rises and falls on leadership by John Maxwell. Think about that. Everything rises and falls on leadership. You were so right in the assessment space. I've been around now for like 15 years. You've been around for longer than that. You are absolutely right. The assessment industry, we have a lot of females in the industry. But at the leadership level, how many people are really there? The representation is not there. And you would have thought that because there's a lot of women in assessments, there will be a lot of women in leadership in assessments, but it's not really so. And that narrative has to change. But I know this is not a surprise to you or anyone listening to us, but it's not just in assessment, it's everywhere. Rory, there are only 6% of women CEOs in the United States. Don't even think about any other country, the United States. Like when you hear stats like that, you start thinking, wait a minute, are we missing something? What's missing? If everything rises and falls on leadership, why are we not seeing more women in leadership? By the way, research also shows that organizations that are led by women are better run. I know. So it makes too much sense. Now, I would take a step back and say it's a concerted effort. We all need each other. But it's just really obvious that there are fewer and fewer women in leadership. And that really has to change. I love to talk about leadership because I know that it makes the difference. For example, I can tell you the organizations I've worked in the past. When you whittle it down to what I really remember, and what really made a difference in my life, it will be the leaders. I
Mm.
don't know about you, but I could literally catalog my career by telling you stories of leaders, one story after the other, and that's the story of one organization after the other. I know you and I didn't quite cross paths, but we're in the same organization in the past. And I know there's certain people, if I mention their names, they were instrumental in your career and in my career. Nancy Thomas comes to mind immediately. Nestor Thomas hired me, a
Hmm.
prometric, and trained me. I know that he works with, she works with you as well. But think about the influence that one single individual like Nancy has made on an entire industry. That's the kind of influence that we all need to intentionally make, where we make up our minds that look beyond the ladder of how to do things. It's also the people, like being there for them as a leader and guiding them in life. Another person that comes to mind immediately is Holly Dance.
Mm-hmm.
You walk again. These are people we cross paths. I think you kind of ran out before I came, so I was like right on your tail. But there are people that would come up and you would know that they make the difference in what you do, beyond the work, beyond the organization. It's the people, and leadership is all about people, all about influencing people. So I'm very passionate about leadership, and I'm very passionate about women in leadership because, believe it or not, we naturally wired to influence people, to be compassionate, to guide people. It's more of a mission drive for us. And I want to see more women being given the opportunity to do that.
Well, I'm going to skip ahead to actually, because you've brought it up, a question that we had talked about that I think just illustrates this so well. So I love you bringing up Nancy Thomas, particularly because she's still involved in our
Yeah.
industry, even in her retirement. And to your point, I think about this subject of legacy, and just within the group that I worked with, um, not only having really helped drive what has become your career, my career. Some of my great colleagues over the years, Manny Straley, Beth
Yeah.
Kalinowski. I mean, the legend grows deep. And I think that is
Yeah.
something that sometimes we forget in our work as leaders. So, with that said, other than Nancy, I mean, what other leaders or managers in your career journey have been instrumental in you evolving not only as a professional but also as a woman leader? And what was most important about how they approached their role that really helped you then and now in your development?
Right. Nancy was the first that came to mind for too many reasons for me, and I'm glad that it resonates with you as well. When she hired me, I was so green. I was so nervous. I had all the degrees and all the letters, but there's the difference between that and knowing the work. Seeing somebody do what they do, pour themselves into it, and bring somebody else along, that was what marked me regarding Nancy. And I also remember that later in my career, in evolving into a leader, Holly played a critical role. I was at a transition phase where, how you're like, okay, at this point, I should be at this stage of my career. And that, I call them career midwives that transition you in that place. You never quite forget them. So that's for me, Holly, that's Nancy. And then at TFP board, Elizabeth, Elizabeth, when you meet some women, they are forces, not just because of what they say, but because of how they live their lives. Elizabeth Stewart is one of those women for me. I watched her lead powerfully. I watched her in rooms that she had to navigate a lot, and she navigated it so well, and also brought the people along. When you see someone be strong in who they are and do things right, you catch more from them than the things they actually tell you directly. People think that leadership or mentoring is when we sit down and I tell you, number one, this is how you do it. Number two, this is how you do it. But the most powerful form of influence, which again, leadership is all about influence, it boils down to that. That actually is my favorite definition of leadership. Leadership is influence. Again, that's by John Maxwell. When you see somebody lead so well, it influences you to want to be that kind of leader. It influences you to want to make another person sit up straighter in their chair by seeing the way you live your life. So Elizabeth was another one for me that I cannot forget how Elizabeth navigated things, how Elizabeth stood, and how she mentored those who were. People always say that and I want to speak directly to women now. Some women say working with other women is always not such a good experience. Have you heard that before, Rari?
Maybe just a few times.
You are not allowed to say that. Only a woman can say that.
I will note for our listeners, I didn't say it. I just answered your.
No, you cannot say that. But there's a preconception, and I would say I'm holding these things lightly because I know it's not gender specific. This could happen whether it's a male or a female. But some people have really tough times with certain leaders. But Elizabeth has debunked that for me. You know how you work with certain leaders and they debunk the myth that you've heard about or that you've assumed. She was the first woman that I worked that closely with in such a powerful role. And the way she led, she was very objective, very principle driven. That's the word. Principle driven. So you know that our leadership was principle centered. It wasn't personality based at all, which made it replicable and also made it really admirable. So I want to be a leader like that, that influences people, but more than that, also shows them the way. There's this saying about when you get up there, send the elevator back down. Don't just skip it up with you. Send the elevator back down to pick other people up, to bring them up to where you are and show them the way, show them the well-worn path of your own food. At least they can start from there and then they can chart their own course. So those are three leaders that stand out to me in my career. And interestingly, they're all women leaders.
Well, I love you bringing up all of those examples, and particularly highlighting Elizabeth, who recently retired as the COO of the CFP board, because having had just a bit of exposure to her, not nearly as much as you did, I love you saying she debunked so many myths, because indeed you are just so spot on in your depiction of her as a tour de force. And indeed she exemplified that, but did so I at least from my perception, in partnership with members of her team. You included, rather than at the expense of any individual. And I think that does really attack at a core myth of female leadership that, unfortunately, to your point, gets spread about and sometimes permeated by individuals who may not be quite setting that mark. And so I love you holding that up as an example, and I hope she has the opportunity to listen to this.
I will send it to her, so she will.
There we go. I love it. Well, just back to you for a moment, and you mentioned earlier it's been spot on a decade and a half now working in the industry, and part of leadership, certainly you mentioned principle-based leadership, but certainly it's also creating that professional identity for oneself, and that's something that, if I may say so, I think you've done really successfully in that amount of time. Can you share more about what was instrumental, in building your personal identity in our profession? And, perhaps maybe what were the principles perhaps that undergird that? What drove that?
Well, thank you for saying that. I would say the first thing is I love what I do. So it's very important to start from there. Um, you cannot last or make lasting impact in something that you're not passionate about. So I think I was really fortunate to locate my passion. Oh, I need to tell you the story before I go into personal branding understanding who you are and what you bring to the table. Back when I was telling you the story about how I transitioned from a State Department into assessment, working at a testing organization. And then, at that point, my background was industrial and organizational psychology. And then I started doing assessments full time and discovered this nerdy, wonderful people called psychometricians. And I'm like, I want what they have. I want to smoke what they're smoking. I want to drink what they're drinking. I want to eat what they're eating. So I went back to school again for educational measurement and statistics because I loved it that much. I bring that up to say it's passion driven for me, and it's always been. And I didn't want to just be well versed in one area of it and not another area of it. I wanted to know it all. So I think I would say the first thing has to do with loving what you do and knowing your stuff. When you know your stuff and you love what you do, then it's just a matter of then having a niche for yourself to say who am I, and what do I bring to the table. So I would say for me, I'm Rory, it's been a passion project of number one, loving assessments, all things assessments, set up a program from nothing or nurturing a program. One of the rare privileges I had was working at a global organization and setting up like literally certification programs, little ones and huge ones. Like having that experience was priceless. And then, of course, you know what happens after that. You start to miss nurturing a program and just staying with it because you've touched so many programs. And now I see people that have that distinct privilege of nurturing a program and just pouring all your love into it. But I think with regards to being in the industry and make creating your own path, it's about number one, loving what you do. You have to love it. And then knowing it. You really have to know. And what is whatever that means. It could mean going back to school, like for me, it did. It could mean certifications. For me, it did. And all of those I had to have it because I really wanted to make sure that I was playing my best game. We all have to love it that much that you want to play your best game. Then when you do, it would look as if the doors just continue to open, Rory. But really, you know how they say overnight success is nothing like that? It's probably, God knows, 30, 40, whatever years. But the day people notice, they're like, how come you've been able to do this? But the truth is, it takes the passion, the dedication, and honestly, the curiosity. There's this study, and I know that you love study and stats, so I had to have one for you. I
But of
had to.
course.
There's this study by Dr. David McClelland. It's a very popular study at Harvard University, and he talked about the fact that 95% of your success is determined by your reference group. Now, people say those who are around you, success or failure in life, 95% of it. But the truth is, in that study, it defined your reference group as the five people you have to, those people that you habitually associate with, those people. So it means that not only should you have the knowledge, the passion, you have to put yourself around the right people. I've been very fortunate all through my career to always be around the right people. And that makes a difference where you end up. You are one of those people, Rory. You always, if I'm in a room presenting and I see Rory in the audience, you're getting all the tough questions. Automatically, I'm sliding it to you. But there's something powerful about surrounding yourself with the right people. So one encouragement I'll have for anyone out there, especially a younger woman in our industry or any industry at that, I would say be passionate about what you do. Make sure you love what you're doing. Because if you don't, you can't sustain success in any measure. You cannot sustain it. You might have a flash of it, but you can't sustain it if you don't have passion for it. So love what you do, whatever that is. And secondly, know your stuff. Know your stuff better than anybody else. You might not know all the things, but know your stuff. Know your stuff more than anybody else. So with the passion and with the knowledge, and then surround yourself with the right people. The study is right. Dr. David McClelland was onto something. Like 95% of your success or failure life is determined by your reference group, those around you, those who you habitually associate. So pick the right people, look for a Rory friend, look for wonderful friends, and keep those around you with your passion, with your knowledge, and with the right group of people around you, right mentors around you, the sky's not even the beginning point for you.
Well, EB, I think that is such a great depiction, and certainly, I think a measuring stick, if you will, that some people can use to just reflect upon where they're at in their own experience. I will say, I don't think anyone, if I may be so blunt, I don't think anyone who's ever met you has ever doubted your passion and exuberance for what you do, and I say that as the greatest of compliment. So, um, well, Ibi, you just brought out and I apologize, Ibi, excuse me. I must say, second time doing that here, so apologies. Um, you just made a mention of a couple things that people can, particularly women in our industry, can use to kind of reflect on their experience and their career goals. I'd love for you to double down on that and extend on that. Any words of advice for women who have potentially recently joined our profession as they work to navigate our space? Because in particular, I think you've hit upon something that's very important. Um, that reference group is so critical,
Mhm.
but it also can be tough to create at times in our industry. We know each other well, we're relatively well bonded as professionals, and so sometimes breaking in can be a little foreboding. So, what would be those words of advice you might give to someone just coming up in our industry?
Right. Well, the first thing will be don't get discouraged. Do not get discouraged. Don't get discouraged. It's so easy to get discouraged to say, you know what, there's really either there's nothing for me to add or there's just no opening. There's no way for me to break in, like you said, or move up in your career, in your organization, wherever you are. The first thing I'll say is don't get discouraged. Keep your head down and keep doing the work. One thing I'll tell you about this industry, and I know it's probably the same for other industries, but I can speak to the assessment industry, is we value expertise. Like when you're good, we value expertise. It is not personal. It is like if you're good at what you do, we will search you out because we need you at the table. We need your voice, we need your expertise. So I would say get busy becoming an expert at what you do. Get busy, getting better, and be around people. We're such a small industry, and that should not be a disadvantage. It's actually an advantage. For example, at the conferences, there are rooms where conversations are happening. Be in those rooms. You get to hear from literally the leading experts on topics. Be in those rooms, contribute. And I would say as well, always have something to bring to the table. Always have something to bring to the table. That would always distinguish you anywhere you go. One of the career advices I remember Holly giving me years ago is like, always come to the meeting better prepared, if possible, than everybody, like always. So there's no casual meeting. Like she would always say that, be better prepared, like come to the meeting prepared. So no matter what the meeting is, come prepared. Now imagine if you're the person who's always prepared in every meeting, who's always leaning in every conversation. It will be noticed. And like I said again, it's about the value. So build your expertise, come prepared, be curious to learn. So we can also, the truth also is, Rory, you know this, there are a lot of incredible individuals around here, like absolutely phenomenal individuals. So you cannot come in trying to outdo anybody. That's not the point. That doesn't work around here at all. What works is coming to the table, bringing something to the table, being prepared for the conversations, leaning into the conversations. And then if someone gives an opportunity, deliver on that and make them glad they did. And then from one thing to the other to the other. And then you don't forget to do the same things for those coming behind. But I'll say above all, don't get discouraged whatsoever. Put your head down, do the work, ask the questions, be in the rooms, and see what you can do to help other people. And they in turn will be glad to help you.
I think that is fantastic advice, and it actually reminds me of a conversation that I was having with an individual who I was mentoring in the profession, a young woman actually, who
Thank you
was
for mentoring a young woman, Rory. That's
uh,
good. Thank
who
you.
was really trying to understand, how to break in. And, I love your mention of the advice of being better prepared and always come with something. And identifying that in her particular case, she had insight on, let's say, some of the latest and greatest with regard to marketing trends that individuals, let's say of my ilk, might not be exposed to, and indeed that was her kind of secret sauce breaking into some conversations. So I love you making that mention, as well as just reinforcing the value that we place on expertise in this profession, particularly in an age when expertise may not be as highly regarded. Well, IB, I must also ask this, and we didn't talk about this in advance, so apologies. But for individuals like myself, for others who are male professionals in this industry, again, from your perspective, what are the things that we can best do to support those women professionals that we might lead, that we may see around the industry, that to really ensure that we are also working actively to promote not just equity, but indeed flourishing amongst the entire industry, regardless of gender.
Yeah. I am so glad you asked. The first thing I would encourage you to do is please, please, please don't hold back because you're thinking they can't handle the truth or they can't handle the feedback. I've seen that a lot where, especially when it comes to the work setting and giving tough feedback and things like that, you're like, you know what, I'll just stay out of it. No, don't. When you're mentoring people, tell them the truth. The truth helps everybody. We all want to know the truth. I probably because of my personality, I'm not afraid to ask for feedback. So I actually go seeking for feedback. Some people are not so good at seeking for feedback, but it doesn't mean they don't want it. Feedback is a gift. So I would say, I would encourage you, Rory, and all the other men in the space to, number one, mentor. I was really glad when you said you were mentoring a younger lady in the assessment industry. I'm so glad. Please mentor, sponsor, give them opportunities, and give them the gift of feedback. I think that one of the things being okay, this is going to my personal life a little bit. I'm an only girl. So I grew up with I grew up with guys. So I'm very used to the way feedback is dished out and you just take it and move on. We miss that in the professional setting. Sometimes don't wait till assessment period or don't wait till you're asked. If you can create a kind of gift giving relationship regarding to feedback, I think we all grow fastest that way. Because again, at a certain stage in your career, and this is not just for women that are new in their careers, it's for everybody. Actually, the faster you go, it's like driving on the highway. You're already going at top speed. You're good. You don't need to make major adjustments, but maybe there's that little thing you always do in a meeting that just changes the mood in the meeting or just changes things, or that self-sabotages, and they don't know. Give them that gift of feedback to just fine-tune that little turn. So I would encourage everyone around us, both women leaders and men leaders as well, to give the gift of feedback. And I would encourage my fellow women leaders to take the feedback, process the feedback, and see if there's something you could do about it, and then start to change because it makes us all better. And when everybody comes in better, the organization is better, you feel better, the home setting is better, the country is better, because then we're all committed to doing better. We're all committed to growing. But sponsorship, mentoring is priceless. We need it. And then as we go, the gift of feedback. It might not be someone you have a day-to-day relationship with, but if you have the opportunity to notice something that you feel is good but could be better, give them that gift of feedback. Let's start doing that for each other more.
Well, IB, I must share, it's been a joy to have this conversation with you, and particularly because as I reflect so many things that you're saying, were lessons I was lucky enough to learn early on from my very strong maternal grandmother and my mother. And so it just brings it all home to me. And I'm appreciative of you sharing your thoughts, your wisdom here, both for our industry and hopefully beyond. So thank you for spending the time today. Thank you for your thoughts. And I look forward to continuing to collaborate and watch your career development. It's been a fantastic ride to watch.
Thank you, Rory, and thank you for inviting me. This has been fun. I hope we have more conversations about this and other topics in the future.
I look forward to it. And for all of those who have watched the full episode, thank you for your time. And I look forward to speaking to you again in our next episode in 2 weeks. Have a wonderful day.